Brought to you from Melbourne, Australia. This is the Badminton Podcast, a community for badminton players by badminton players, where we talk badminton, celebrate local heroes, interview players from all walks of life, and push you to grow as a player and a person. Introducing your hosts, Jeff and Henry.
Hello, everyone out there in our badminton community. And for those who might have just stumbled across us, welcome to the Badminton Podcast, proudly supported by Volant. My name's Jeff.
And I'm Henry.
We're the co-founders of Volant, the brand that offers the world the most versatile badminton apparel. And we're actually making our own rackets too. So if you're looking to find some badminton clothing you can wear confidently on and off the court and have a really cool, slick racket with you as well, then you need to check us out. You can find us on www.volantwear.com and on our social media, our handle is Volantwear, VOLANTWEAR. We're excited to be here today for another episode of our podcast so that we can share with you how much we love the sport of badminton, and we can bring to you some wisdom, some knowledge, some stories, and some entertainment from some of our amazing guests from all over the world. And the aim of this podcast is to build our badminton community to help you to become a better player and a person, because a lot of the things we talk about are skills in badminton itself and life as well. So thanks again for tuning in. Henry, I'll let you do the honors to introduce our guest for today.
Thanks, Jeff. We have a really exciting guest on today who we had the privilege to catch up with a couple of weeks ago. So I'll tell you a bit about him. Jamie is the new CEO at Badminton Australia. He is an engaging and inclusive leader who has developed and led high-profile organisations throughout his career. Through his energetic and collaborative leadership style, Jamie has demonstrated an understanding, capability to lead and facilitate the development of strategic priorities and implement these to ensure successful operational outcomes in the sport, entertainment, recreation, tourism, and cultural sectors. Jamie is able to develop and build high-performing teams of people to deliver organisational strategic priorities through valuing and engaging all key people involved, including customers, participants, members of boards, paid staff, volunteers, contractors, partners, and other key stakeholders. How is that for a CV?
We can be number one in the world in the way we create leaders from our athletes. We can be number one in the world in the way that we develop positive coaching techniques. We can be number one in the world in the way that we deal with strength and conditioning. We can be number one in the world in the way we organise ourselves. We can be number one in the world in the team spirit that we exhibit, whether that's team spirit at an international event or whether it's team spirit at a social competition on a Wednesday night. So the only thing stopping us from being number one in the world in those things is ourselves.
Welcome onto the show, Jamie.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks, Jeff. I couldn't be more excited than to be on the show with both of you. I'm a real fan. I've listened to every podcast and I feel like it's a real privilege being on your show. So thank you for having me.
Jamie, we're also pumped to have you on, and we really do appreciate you reaching out to us. So for everyone listening out there, Jamie reached out to us before he took his, was it either before or very soon after getting the CEO position at Badminton Australia, just commenting about what was good about the podcast, what he's enjoyed, what's useful. And also he said that, look, if we wanted to have him on, he could have some expertise and talk about certain things. So we love that. So if anyone's out there listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, please let us know. Please let us know how we can improve. And feel free to reach out if you feel that you want to tell your story on the podcast as well, because we are all welcoming. So Jamie, thanks again for being on the show. So in your current role as CEO at Badminton Australia, how's it all been and how long have you been doing it for?
Well, good question. It's my 30th day today. That includes weekends. I've really loved it. I know this sounds a bit corny, but I think I've really fallen in love with the sport. Was able to go to the Oceania Championships. I was able to go to the National Championships down in Tasmania. And I really just couldn't get enough of the game. I really loved watching the athletes compete and seeing how they went. I've been really welcomed into the whole community. Everywhere I've gone, people have been so hospitable and so friendly. It's made it really easy for me to settle into my role. So I've really enjoyed my time so far.
Yeah, glad that you've enjoyed your time. And yeah, another welcome from me and Jeff. And certainly we've managed to catch up previously. But for the people in the badminton community that aren't so familiar about you, can you tell us a bit about your history with sports and work?
Yeah, so prior to this role, I was the CEO at Gymnastics Victoria. I was there for 6.5 years and we achieved a huge amount. I was quite sad to leave, and I think the community was quite sad that I had left that role, but it was time for me to move on. So we achieved a huge amount in that role together with myself and the staff and gymnastics community. I've also had roles and senior roles at Netball Australia, the World Swimming Championships and Badminton Victoria, Football Federation Victoria, and also the Deaf Olympic Games. And I've been on the boards of Little Athletics Victoria. I've also currently on the board of Vic Sport, that's the peak body for sport in Victoria. And then I've been heavily involved as an athlete and player. Soccer was my original sport. Rightly or wrongly, I was the kid in the playground that would organise everyone into teams to play sport at recess and lunchtime. And ever since then, I've always been involved in that organiser of sport, which I really love and enjoy. My children are very talented in sport and I've been on boards of their sports as well. So it's given me a really good background in what works and what doesn't work in the sports industry. But I've also worked in the cultural arts and tourism sectors at Museum Victoria, the Shrine of Remembrance in Victoria. I worked in the Northern Territory for an Aboriginal organisation and an Ingi Congress, and that was a great experience as well. So I'm really hoping that I can bring that expertise and the knowledge I have and the networks I have to really build and strengthen the sport of badminton in Australia.
Yeah, it's a really impressive CV, Jamie, and we're really excited to have you on to see what you can do. In regards to your badminton history in the past, have you played much before? And I think I remember you saying to me when we caught up that you played a little with your kids, but what's your involvement in badminton in the past?
Yeah, well, I probably call myself expert badminton backyard player. Christmas times and family get-togethers, having a hit, which is always fun. But when I worked at the Deaf Olympic Games, badminton was one of the sports that we looked after there. We had athletes from around the world and from over 80 countries in a multi-sport event, which was an amazing and fantastic experience. And that was my first probably formal experience of competitive badminton. We managed to get our hands on a prototype version of air badminton, an air badminton shuttle, which one of the key initiatives from the BWF. So we went outside and had a hit with that. And I have to say it was really enjoyable. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can use air badminton for people to play badminton outside and really expand the scope of the sport. So I guess I'm clutching at straws a little bit and trying to talk about my badminton history. But I certainly, in the short time I've been involved, I've really enjoyed it so far.
And so what was the reason that you decided to actually apply for the CEO position at Badminton Australia? I know that you said it was time to move on from Gymnastics Australia, although you did have a really good team there and you built that reputation and you had a really good result from doing that. What was the reason why you decided to shift over to badminton?
I think I always had an aspiration to come back and work in a national sport organisation after my time at Netball Australia. I really enjoyed the challenges that presented, working not just across Australia, but with partners around the world. And so we really created a learning experience and a learning environment for staff, including myself at my last job. And so succession planning was an important part of that. So essentially my board there trained me up to leave. And so we really sat down and mapped out what I thought my career objectives were, then waited for an opportunity to come up. So I wasn't really looking to leave. I didn't apply for any other roles, but this role came up and I saw it and I thought that would be a great challenge. Badminton has a great reputation throughout the sports industry. And I thought, what better way than to get back into a national sport organisation from such a well-respected sport as badminton. So I applied for the job, went through the process. I think there was 3 interviews. I think I had psychological testing. I flew up and had a one-on-one meeting at my own expense with Andrew, the president, in Brisbane. I really made that decision then to decide this is the role for me. So I accepted it and we've been out at Williamstown, and I can tell a little secret to all the listeners out there that we will be moving the Badminton Australia office from Williamstown into around the Albert Park area within the next couple of months. So that'll also help to take our organisation to the next level, to really be in that precinct where we can develop and grow as an organisation and continue to serve the badminton community.
I'm actually really excited about the prospect of that, because I've been to the Badminton Australia offices in Williamstown, Techno Park Drive, and it's not I'm not going to say bad things about the office, but in terms of a professional sporting body, I think being around that Albert Park area is going to give us a better environment to be in. And I guess you feel the same way about that, do you, Jamie?
Yeah, absolutely. If we want to develop and grow, we can't do it on our own. We need to work in partnership. We need to learn from others. We need to build relationships with not just those outside the badminton community, but within the badminton community as well. And I think the best way we can do that is to be in a city location where we can do those things. So I think that that's a key strategic decision that the board has made, a really positive one that we can really build on and continue to grow.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Jamie. And I want to rewind a little bit and talk about your journey in other small sporting organisations like Badminton Australia and potentially big ones as well, for example, netball. I want to ask you, what challenges did you have to overcome when working for those organisations that you feel will help you in developing Badminton Australia?
I think one of the lessons, I've learned a few lessons over the course of my career and involvement in sport. I think one of the key ones we learn is that people get involved in sport for all different reasons. In business, it's maybe a little bit more straightforward in the sense that really the business is there to make money, service the community. But if you're not making money, then the business folds. Sport's a little bit different because you have a whole range of people involved with all different motivations. You have board members that want to develop the sport. You have athletes that want to succeed in the sport. You have judges and umpires and referees that have a really deep love for the sport and want to contribute. You have volunteers. You have parents that have children and they want to see their children succeed. So there's a whole range of different motivating factors in all of that. And I think one of the changes and one of the lessons I've learned is it's not about separating those people and treating them as individual groups, but it's about how we can bring those people together so that we can collectively make decisions that are the best interests of the sport. Because all of those groups that I've just mentioned, and I did mention sponsors and partners as well, all of the groups that I've mentioned collectively bring such fantastic expertise and knowledge that if we can harness all of that information, if we can harness all of that intellectual knowledge, we can work together and really make good decisions that not only lead to the financial success and financial sustainability of sport, which is now so important, but also means those other things such as development of athletes, development of leadership of athletes, the health and well-being of athletes, creating a learning organisation so that judges, referees, coaches, club owners, club presidents, club committee members, club volunteers can all develop together, develop their own pathway in the sport, succeed, have fun, enjoy themselves. And if we can do that, then the whole sport will grow. So I think that's one of the key lessons. Another one is sport has changed over time and continues to change. People are less willing to volunteer than they were maybe 10, 15 or 20 years ago. People have less time now. Social media, the impact of the internet, the different entertainment options that people have in the world mean that we have to be equally as strategic to compete for people's time to ensure that our sport can grow and continue to prosper. And I'll just mention one more thing, which is a third key lesson I've learned, is that as sport and peak bodies, we're not sport administration organisations. That's a key error I think that some sport organisations make, is that we're not administrative organisations. We are customer service organisations. And if we come in and we take that attitude and we recruit staff who want to help people, if we can recruit volunteers that want to help people, then we become more responsive organisations that service our badminton community or our sports community, which builds their capability capacity, which in turn means the sport can grow and develop.
So for the people listening who aren't in Australia, or perhaps they are, but the Australian national body, they don't have much to do with it, I think it's really important to point out what you said, is that a lot of people think that managing a club, even at a club level or a state level. It's just organization, it's management, but it's not just that. It is really about providing the customer, the players, with something that they want to do and having it appeal to them and interest them so that we can keep them in the sport. And the fact that you said that there's lots of other distractions now with social media, internet, Netflix at the click of a button. You can watch any movie with the click of a button, and people choosing to do that. And we need to be up to par, and the world needs to be up to par in creating a badminton environment where that is more important than sitting down and being on Facebook or Instagram or watching Netflix. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Our competitors aren't other smaller sports, or our competitors are big sports that have realized they're in the entertainment industry and competing for people's time. Our competitors are people who sit there playing computer games on their computer or on their television. Our competitors are the way that social media competes for people's time. And if we can build our story, if we can build our narrative as our compelling story why people should participate in badminton, it means that our sport can prosper and develop. It means that clubs can prosper and develop, and associations. It means that people who own clubs can prosper and are living from their clubs. And that can only be a good thing for the wonderful, awesome sport of badminton.
Yeah, I think that's really important, that competing of time. There is an abundance of people in the world to play our sport. And it's not that we have to take them away from other sports. Like you said, it's getting the people out there who are not involved in any sports at all. And there's plenty of those that we can embrace and basically invite to be a part of the badminton community. Now, Jamie, moving on from that, and it's kind of linked to that anyway, in the chat that we had over a coffee a couple of weeks ago, we had the privilege of hearing what your vision was for badminton. And I know this is coming from an Australian perspective, but I encourage the listeners to think about this in a world context as well. It can be any context, whether it's your club, state, national, or world level. And it's just really about building the sport within your area or wherever you are. And although you haven't been in the role that long at Badminton Australia, can you give us a glimpse into what you see as the vision for badminton in your eyes at this point in time?
Yeah, so I think from an Australian perspective, we want to be a growing sport achieving on the world stage. We want to be a sport that is supporting the capacity of our volunteers and clubs to provide meaningful experiences for our participants, whether they be coaches, volunteers, or athletes. In terms of high performance, whilst we're not currently ranked number one in the world rankings, we can be number one in the world at lots of other things. We can be number one in the world in the way we create leaders from our athletes. We can be number one in the world in the way that we develop positive coaching techniques. We can be number one in the world in the way that we deal with strength and conditioning. We can be number one in the world in the way we organize ourselves. We can be number one in the world in the team spirit that we exhibit, whether that's team spirit at an international event or whether it's team spirit at a social competition on a Wednesday night. So the only thing stopping us from being number one in the world in those things is ourselves. We're not competing with anyone other than ourselves to be able to achieve that. If we can achieve those things, which is entirely possible, then our performances on the world stage will inevitably improve and develop. And we will start getting players into the top 10. We will start getting players that have a better chance of winning a medal at the Olympics. But the only way we're going to get there if we do it together. So that collaborative decision-making that I spoke before, as we go through the process of developing those strategic objectives for our sport, is going to be really, really important. I have met so many intelligent, smart people in this sport in such a short time. Doctors and veterinarians and plumbers who own their own businesses and just professional, successful people, smart, intelligent people. And we can harness all of that intellectual knowledge. We can be number one in the world in so many different things.
Yeah, I love that you bring such a fresh perspective on badminton and how we as a country can actually be number one at so many things that we don't typically think about, especially for us when we were always thinking about badminton in Australia. It was always that, we couldn't compete with the world players from a perspective of skill. But there's so many other aspects that you've touched on that, yes, we certainly can compete with. And certainly I remember our conversation We were talking about how Australia is number one at, I guess, cheering for its own country, or basically the enthusiasm for the nation when it comes to sports. And it's something that resonates with our country.
Absolutely. It's something that we're renowned for Australians in all different sports. You know, you think about all the times you've watched a tennis match or watched the Socceroos play or seen the Australian Diamonds netball team play and how their team spirit and togetherness gets them over the line. And I've seen so many athletes that have that desire in just a short time I've been here, especially a lot of talented young people coming through the programs. And if we can harness them and their talent into an Australian style of playing badminton, I reckon we can have a lot of success over the next 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that, Jamie. I want to talk a bit about the skill aspect of developing the world-class players that we hope to achieve in Australia. I mean, being so far away from the rest of the world and having our best players scattered across Australia, what do you see I know you've only been in the role for 30 days now, but what do you see as our way to tackle the challenges of developing world-class players here?
I think that the first thing we need to do collectively as a sport, we need to decide what our strategy is. Do we want a centralized program or a decentralized program? Do we want a program that is decentralized but extended camps? Do we want a program, as some sports do, based overseas, basing our adult athletes in Malaysia or somewhere like that while they're on the world tour could assist with getting that expertise we need from the world's best coaches? So that's really the first step for us to work out collectively as sport. What's our strategy moving forward? Once we know that, we can recruit. We can get the structure right, get the right staff. We're not going to be successful if we don't get the world's best people helping us to succeed and achieve. The world's best people leaving a legacy for people in our badminton community to learn from so that we can have long-term success for many years.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jamie. And the fact that we are trying to be number one in certain things, even though if we're not number one in the world in, say, a medal, then like you said, I really like the idea of being number one at a lot of different things. And in order to do that, finding a strategy that's going to work for our country, just as any other country would need to. Every country has their own challenges in terms of the size of the country, distance between players, clubs, etc. And even if it's not that, there's a lot of challenges. It's just really trying to adapt to the challenges out there in terms of developing top-class players.
I think you're right about that. And the other thing I would add is the health and well-being of athletes must be central to our success. You guys talk about it a lot, and it really impresses me the way that you are building that into everything you do. If we can build a culture and strengthen the culture of the health and well-being of our athletes, whether they're someone who have just walked through the door for their first hit of badminton or whether they're someone on the world stage in line for Olympic selection, we can not just create great badminton players, but we can create great people that want to stay involved in the sport when they get to the end of their careers, great people who will advocate for our sport to government. Facilities is a massive issue, as I've been going around already. Not having enough or the right facilities is important for our overall development as a sport. I think if we can put that central to everything we do, then many of the other things we want to achieve will follow suit.
Yeah, Jamie, and just following on from that, when we did have a chat over coffee the other day, we were talking about badminton as a brand. So, of course, with Volant and the Badminton Podcast, we are trying to build a brand within ourselves that shows the community how much we love badminton. And it's about growing our brand in Volant for the products as well as the Badminton Podcast for the community. But you also had a great idea about badminton as a brand to the general public. So could you just expand on what you mean by having badminton as a brand rather than just a sport in itself?
Yeah, so what I mean by one brand for badminton is we really need to work out what our message is to non-badminton people. Why is it that people should get involved in badminton? And I've learned in the short time that I've been here, there are so many wonderful things about badminton for why people should get involved and why parents should choose badminton as a sport for their children to come and try and stick with. If we can promote that one message, promote that one story, promote that one brand that is badminton, we can really then, it's the foundation for us being successful. We need to partner with other people. We need to partner with sponsors. We need to partner with government. We need to partner with people who want to set up clubs that they can succeed. So I'll just use a couple of examples. So if you look at sports like tennis and swimming and hockey and triathlon, and you look at their branding, their brand is their sport. Their brand is tennis. Their brand is swimming. In badminton, and all sports go through this process. In badminton, we've got multiple brands. We've got Badminton Australia. We have Badminton Victoria, Badminton Northern Territory, Badminton Western Australia, all with different logos, different colours, different styles, different ways of doing things. So if we can build strategic alignment and we can build one brand for badminton, then that helps us to tell our story to non-badminton people and get them involved. And this isn't, some amazing idea that I've come up with. This is what all sports in the federated model are doing to build their success. So part of the process I've been going through is meeting with all the key people across our badminton community. I met with the Tasmanian board on last week, the Badminton Victoria board on Monday night. I'm meeting with the Western Australian board on this coming Monday, and also the Northern Territory board, and I've met with the New South Wales board. And everyone's of the same view. We want to find ways to grow the sport. And I've asked all of them to just consider what strategic alignment in terms of strategy and what alignment regarding brand and messaging looks like. And I hope that we can get to the point with everyone that will take that path. And again, there will be no looking back for us if we can get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the brand, when you're saying about the badminton brand and showing the community or non-badminton players that badminton is the sport to be actually playing, before you actually started, or even before you decided to apply for the role at Badminton Australia, what was your perception of the branding of badminton? What were you feeling about the sport? Did you know much about it? Was it positive? Was it neutral? Was it negative?
Well, it's certainly positive. Being an Olympic sport is a really big plus for badminton. The sport probably suffered from lack of media coverage. The sport is tucked away inside, which means it's not like driving past an outdoor rugby field or netball field that you see all the time when you're driving around the streets of Australia. So I think that was a limitation. I think the other thing is badminton doesn't have a collective story about why there's a compelling reason for people to participate in badminton. And there's lots of really positive things. And I just take Shuttle Time as a really great program and a great example that really promotes children's fine motor skills. It promotes coordination amongst children. It promotes strength and balance and flexibility and cooperation and patience and collaboration. These are all things that parents want for their children. So if we can tell the story clearly, concisely, and articulately as to why you should be bringing your child to badminton, then the sport will grow. So I think that's, definitely a missing link, because it's only since I've started in the role that I've thought, well, what is our message out to the wider community? And I don't think we've got to the point yet of being able to articulate that. So I think overall, quite positive. And certainly after coming into the sport, there's great opportunities to grow.
It's great, Jamie. And when I'm thinking of badminton as a brand, or being a backyard badminton kind of guy myself when I first started, when I thought about it, I always thought, okay, it's a backyard sport, doesn't really take much skill to play it. And I know I'm probably speaking to the wrong people, being on the Badminton Podcast, being a co-host and telling our badminton community that, I thought of it as just a backyard sport. And I think that's probably aligned with a lot of people who aren't that familiar with badminton around the world. Are there any key, I know you talked briefly about Shuttle Time and the key features or attributes that they promote as part of their story to the general public, but are there any key features of the sport that you have identified in the last few weeks that you would say would be the really good aspects of the sport to promote?
Yeah, well, I think you just articulated then for me, Henry, what the strengths of the sport are. And I know some people describe badminton in a negative way I only hear badminton people say this, by the way, that it's a backyard sport, that it's a picnic sport, that it's a sport, it's their key strengths, Many Australians have played badminton in their backyard. They've played it at school. They're familiar with badminton. So if we can nudge those people along to keep playing in the backyard, keep playing at picnics, keep exposing their children to the sport, and we can promote the pathway into a club environment, I think that that's actually a real strength. I think air badminton, if we can get local councils, instead of building the 100th tennis court in Australia for our international guests, tennis is massive in Australia. There's probably 100 tennis courts in every local council area. If we can get those councils to even just build one or turn one of those tennis courts or one new tennis court into badminton courts, that will expose the sport to many, many people and, again, help our clubs to grow. So I know you think of it as a negative, but I think of it as a positive. Think about cricket. They celebrate beach cricket. They celebrate backyard cricket. They celebrate, netball celebrates netball in the park. And we need to do the same for badminton.
Yeah, that's quite fascinating that's what you found. And potentially it might just be badminton players or potentially myself, insecurities about the sport and promoting it confidently in a westernized country. Now, certainly the people that I hear talking about badminton as a backyard sport are typically badminton players. So it's a very interesting insight that you provided there, Jamie.
The first thing when I let my friends know that I had taken on this job, the first thing all of them said was one of two things. Oh, yeah, I played badminton in the backyard. Or others said, oh, yeah, I played badminton at school. And
that's so typical.
And it really warmed the cockles of my heart because, we've got a head start on so many other sports that people are already familiar in Australia with badminton.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you bring across. And it is a bit of a mind shift in taking it negatively and then you coming in with a new, fresh perspective and saying, hey, this is actually a win for our sport because so many people know it. And we've had lots of international guests on the podcast and professional players as well. And some of them do resonate with the fact that people just think it is a backyard sport. And I guess we all do have this kind of, Henry said insecurity, but I'm saying more of a defensive nature about our sport because we all love it. We all know how amazing the sport is. And I think we feel that describing it as backyard or beach or I played it at school once, it just takes away from what it takes to be an exceptional player. But I can definitely see where you're coming from in that we should celebrate that because if at least they're playing in the backyard, right? At least they're not. Yeah, exactly. It's still exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to create fans. We're creating fans of badminton. We know through evidence that if people are fans of badminton, they're 7 times more likely to purchase badminton products than those that aren't. So there's a commercial reality as well around why we want to embrace every aspect of the sport. And then that commercial activity can only then help to support our competitive and elite players be successful on the pathway.
Yeah, it definitely seems like we need to work out a strategy or a development pathway for those that do play the backyard badminton version or air badminton in the future and how we can transition them into the indoor stadium or what I guess Jeff and I and probably a lot of badminton players would be thinking that the proper badminton. But as you've highlighted, that badminton can be played in so many different ways and it's right for us to actually celebrate and shed a positive light on that despite so much negativity around that point of view.
Yeah, and look at a sport like beach volleyball. No differences to the conversation we're having now 25 or 30 years ago. And now in a lot of ways, beach volleyball is more popular than indoor volleyball. There's opportunities for us to think about outdoor badminton in the same type of way. Yeah,
and Jamie, in the 2 weeks since we caught up, have you learned anything about Badminton Australia or key standout areas that you feel there are opportunities for the sport in, other than the ones that we've talked about?
Yeah, well, I think there's lots of commercial opportunities for the sport. Many of the people I've met in clubs now are saying to me that they don't have enough courts. If they could have enough courts, they could get more people involved. So I think that's a key lesson to learn. I think our events, we can make them more sustainable. As you both know, we have quite a number of events that operate across Australia, both senior and adult high-level international competitions, as well as junior competitions and our national championships. And I think that's a key area that we need to look at how we can design our event strategy to ensure that our events are financially sustainable, that they are promoting the sport and they are aligning with the high performance pathway. I don't know enough yet to know if this is the case in badminton, but certainly for many other sports and many sports that I've been involved in, many of them have operated for between 50 and 100 years. Mm-hmm. They've developed some fantastic assets in terms of their event structures. But along with that comes the development of athletes. And what I've seen in other sports is that the athlete development pathway is based on the events and competition pathway, and that might be okay. But it's something that we need to examine and determine, is that the best way of doing it? Because probably the better way of doing it is to say, well, what is the best way to develop athletes? And then let's make sure our event program is able to fit in with the development of athletes rather than the other way around. So I think that is quite an important area that we need to develop. We've spoken a lot about high performance. We need to put our high performance plan together, ensure we've got the whole community on board with that, ensure there's alignment across the country. And that all leads to, we really need to make sure that we're putting our overall badminton in Australia, so not Badminton Australia, badminton in Australia, strategic plan together that identifies our priorities, having key measurable targets that we can measure and ensure there's alignment, not just at state level, but also at association and club level as well. So I think they're probably the key things I would pick out.
Yeah, that's great, Jamie. We're just starting to wrap up here and just bring everything together. So I guess someone who's listening might be thinking, oh, hey, that all sounds well and good, but that's all high level stuff. That's all, okay, Badminton Australia. I know you were talking about badminton in Australia, but they might be thinking, look, what control do I have? What can I actually do? So in terms of what any badminton player could do, even if they're just president of their club or not even president, maybe they just play socially with their friends once a week or once a month. Did you have any tips for them as to how they can help to improve the participation in the sport or promote our sport or build more community engagement?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of things people can do at the grassroots level. And in fact, the grassroots level needs to be the priority of our strategic planning. It needs to be central to everything we do, because that's where the key volunteers are that create the environments for people to participate in badminton. So there's a number of things people can do, and maybe I'll pick out three key ones. The first one is, when we do start our strategic planning process, is to be part of that process. So if you see a survey that comes out, if there's a forum that you see that's available to go to, if you're asked for feedback from the president of your club or the committee of your club, is to provide feedback so all of that can be collated together. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is share as much as you can on social media about your experience in badminton. Take a photo of yourself, take a photo of your kids, share it with your friends and family. If you know someone who works in the media, get them to come down to your club and take a cute photo of a cute bunch of kids playing badminton. I think anything you can do, anything anyone can do to expose the sport to as wide a range of people as possible is really, really important. And the third thing I would say is, don't feel like you're on your own. If you're a club president or a committee member, sometimes people can feel overwhelmed, and that is to ask for help. You'd be surprised when you go out and talk to someone directly and say, look, I really need a hand with this. I really need a hand with setting up the nets on Saturday morning. Would you mind coming down half an hour earlier? You'd be surprised when people are directly asked how likely they are to give you a hand. Often when people, I've seen this in my experiences, often when you ask people for assistance and for someone to step forward as a group, everyone waits for someone else to step forward. So I think, be proactive and ask people directly to give you a hand. And it makes your life easier if you're in one of those leadership positions. And makes badminton more fun for you so you don't get burnt out.
Fantastic, Jamie. Those are 3 actionable tips. You've heard it on the Badminton Podcast that you, as a badminton community member, whether you are a player, professional athlete, a player in Australia, a player anywhere in the world, can help build the sport. So those 3 things are to make sure you provide some good feedback, especially when your club president or anyone involved in developing the strategy behind developing the sport asks you questions. So fill out those surveys. Make sure you take plenty of photos and videos for the gram, as well as TikTok and Facebook, whichever social media program or channel that you use. And the final thing, if you're asked, lend a helping hand. And if you're the person asking, definitely consider asking for help if you need it. So, Jamie, it's been a really exciting episode of the Badminton Podcast, and we love that you provide a very fresh new perspective on some of the, I guess, more we perceive to be negative things about the sport and how we can actually switch that around and create, I guess, a positive movement, a positive culture so that we can grow the sport. We can show the world how incredible badminton is, whether that be on a grass surface, potentially on a clay surface, and definitely indoors. So, Jamie, we're wrapping up now. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with? Is there any questions that we haven't asked you that you're dying to answer by any chance?
Well, I feel like we could go on chatting for another 3 hours, to be honest, but I know that we can't. But what I would say is for any of your listeners out there, please, when you see me around the place, when you see me at any events, either in Australia or even overseas, please come over and say hello and let me know about your badminton story. I love a chat and I love hearing those personal stories. That really helps me in my role. It helps me and shapes my thoughts and decision-making around the sport. So I think that's what I'd leave you with. Make sure you come over and say hello.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Make sure you do that, just purely because Jamie's a really nice guy and he's really enthusiastic about the sport, even though he's only been in it for a short time. But when we had coffee that day, we could really feel the enthusiasm, and we are really excited to have him as part of badminton in Australia in developing our awesome sport. So look, for all the listeners out there, wherever you are in the world, from Henry and I at Volant and the Badminton Podcast, we just want to say thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We're going to continue to bring you episodes and interview people from all walks of life so that we get some perspective, we can build our badminton community, and hopefully you can go away with some tips or some action items that you can actually use in your life right away. It's going to help you develop yourself as a player, as a person, and develop the sport in itself. Also, make sure you share this episode with everyone that you know and grow our badminton community, because that's what we're here for. We are trying to build that badminton brand for us, and this is one of the key elements of the reason why we actually hold this podcast.
So get out there, train hard, play hard, have fun, and share your love of badminton so that we can show the world how incredible our sport is. And Jamie, if there's anyone in the community that does want to say hello and they might not catch you in person, is there somewhere else that they can find you?
Absolutely. You can contact me through the Badminton Australia website and leave a message or send an email through, and I'll be sure to get back to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jamie. And if you want to connect with me or Jeff, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and TikTok via our social media handle, Volantwear, VOLANTWEIAR, or the Badminton Podcast, as well as our website, www.volantwear.com.
Love hearing from you guys, so please feel free to reach out if you've got any questions. We are doing episodes where we are answering questions directly from the badminton community, and we would love to hear what you will find of value on our future episodes. So see you on the next episode, and thanks for tuning in.
See you on the next episode.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jamie.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast was brought to you by Volant, the most versatile badminton apparel you'll ever own.